inside the recording studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing pretty good, Jody.
Just
How about
pretty
yourself?
good. Oh, I'm dandy. I'm bubbly. I'm happy. It's going to be a fun-filled day.
All right. That sounds great.
Oh yeah. I get to get
Why the
greasy this
laughs?
afternoon.
Why are you feeling good? I mean, not that you shouldn't.
Well,
but, you know.
I'm going to feel good when I get my car back together. I'm trying to be a wrench monkey. Is that what they call them? Wrench monkeys? I don't know. My car's in pieces at the moment, but it'll be back together later this afternoon. So I'll be dirty.
You have a greasy day ahead of you.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it won't be too greasy. But along with talking about grease,
Yes,
we're talking about master bus grease today, right?
we are.
Greasing the master bus. In other words, what are you doing with your master bus in a mix?
Yeah. Do you have anything on it? Don't you? What do you got there? Why are you doing that? And
all those
everything in
fun-filled
between.
facts of questions and answers.
Yeah. So I suppose we should start with the elementary question.
Do you have something on your master bus?
I do. Yes, I do.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, this very much comes down to workflow, obviously, like we talked about before. There are several artists, several mix engineers that don't, you know.
Don't? Yes, is it an ongoing war where some people believe you must have something on your master bus and the other side going, no, piss off. There should be nothing on the master bus.
Yeah, I think war might be a strong word, but no, but I think
is it a political divide? No.
Oh, let's hope not. Let's give people a respite from all that nonsense. But I think it comes down to whatever your mentality is. I mean, you've discussed in prior episodes how you liked in the past to keep your signal nice and unadulterated all the way through. So I guess this is a similar mindset, and it's just what works for them. Now, I would like to make the point too, is that when we're talking, or at least when I'm talking about what's on your master bus, I am not talking about mastering the track, or any limiting on there.
No, this is strictly about mixing right now.
Yeah.
The other M to music.
Right. Music, mastering, and mixing in a different order, hopefully.
That's right.
But it's... for me, it's a way to add a certain color, and there's that word of cohesion to the mix, or glue is the buzzword, right?
The buzzword, glue?
Glue, adding glue and vibe to the mix, and depth and girth and all those big words.
Don't speak of what you do not know of.
Why? What are you implying?
Nothing.
I have stuff on my master bus. Yes, I do.
You do. Good for you.
I do. So, and it's like everything else. I think it's been a work in progress where I've realized what I like to do and what I can add to it, and to get me the result that I'm looking for a little bit smoother. And so I can kind of see, where I'm heading with my mix.
It's like a roadmap, predefined.
Yeah, something like that, or at least in the ballpark, right? I know, okay, well, this is kind of where I want to go. So I know I'm going to need this, and this to get me there.
Sure.
And so it's a smaller thing. So maybe I should go into...
Well, let's. So here's a good question for you then, since you're putting stuff on your master bus. What type of things are you putting on your master bus? What are you doing? Why do you have what?
Good question. So let me start. I'll start from the top, I suppose. As I mentioned before, I am an avid Slate user. I like Slate stuff, but this is just and it could be anything that does the same type of thing, obviously. But I start with a console emulation, and a lot of times that would be kind of like an SSL 4K E emulation, but that can change on any mix, but that's just where I usually start. I also have a very gentle slope EQ on there as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have now at this point, I'm using the again the Slate Custom series I have on there. Um, at first, this is doing nothing. It's just there. Should I need to make small tweaks? I also have in the Slate rack, I have the EOS's Airband EQ and the Earth, which is the low band EQ. They're sitting there as well. Should I need to do any kind of low cut filtering or adding a little bit of air? But again, first step, they're not doing anything.
So they're there, but they're turned off, is what you're saying, or are they left on?
They're left on.
They're left on, but they're flat.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily impart any kind of audio magic just by being on in this case.
Come now. Everything's supposed to impart magic when it's left on, isn't it?
Yeah, right. No, but in this case, they don't. That's not what they do. But I do have, after that, I have and this is going to sound possibly kind of weird, but I have 2 master bus compressors.
You are correct. That sounds absolutely bizarre.
Let me explain. Again, I am using the virtual bus compressors from Slate. My favorite one, at least at the moment, is what's called the FG Red, which is kind of an emulation of the Focusrite compressor. And that does the heavy lifting. And it's not really even heavy lifting. I use very, very gentle compression. It's could be like a 2-to-1, maybe like a 3-to-1, depending on the track. But it's very gentle, and it's taking off a couple of dBs possibly, just to add that glue, right? And that is on when I start a mix.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I may adjust there is, or not may adjust, that I will adjust depending on the track tempo and all this kind of thing, is of course attack and release times, so that it's not too aggressive, that it's taking too much.
So here's a question for you on the attack and release times.
Yes.
A lot of the times with delays, you might look up a tempo chart to figure out the milliseconds that you're going to do, or the amount of delay in some fashion. Do you do the same thing with your attack and your release on your compressors? Do you have like a tempo chart that tells you this is X amount of milliseconds and this is how it's going to divide out?
99 times out of 100, no. I don't do. I just do it by ear. I've done that on things where I might have a certain effect on a rhythmic element of the song, let's say like a snare drum or anything like that. But on the full mix, no.
Okay.
I don't do that. It's doable.
Just asking.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. But I tend to just do it sort of by ear and kind of see. So I'm not getting too much of a squash is kind of what it kind of comes down to. Yeah. I don't want to like squeeze that too much and just get all the life out of it. But I do that. I have same thing, obviously, with the release. Sometimes I even opt just for auto release. If that sounds good, I'll leave it there. Other things I tend to do is on this particular compressor, there is a high pass filter that is for the detection. So I roll off a lot of the low end up to maybe like 100, maybe even 150, but that's just for the detection. So it doesn't roll it off in the mix. It's just not to have that trigger the compressor unnecessarily.
I get it.
Good. So that's my first compressor, and that's what does the actual compression. Then I have also just on there the FGMU, and that compressor is not emulating one particular unit, but it is kind of a cross between a Fairchild and a Manley compressor. And the only reason I have that on, not doing any compression at all, is because it actually adds this, or it adds to the soundbite just being on, just like you were alluding to before. And it adds.
It's got some juju that it's imparting to the sound with doing nothing.
Yes, kind of crazy, but you definitely hear it just turning it on and bypassing it. It adds a little bit of like a mid-range bump to it that can just add a little bit of clarity. So I know,
The
amazing,
man
right?
who hates mid-range is adding mid-range
I only hate mid-range
on
when it comes to
guitars.
your old guitar tones.
Yeah, I know.
um, so that can just bring a little bit of clarity to that. So that's basically what I have on there at all times. I may or may not. This is usually a later stage, but when I go to print mixes or later on in the mix stage, I may have a tape emulation as a last step there as well, depending on the type of track that is. If I want that kind of tapey juju type of vibe.
Tapey juju.
Yes, it's a
Well spoken,
sounds like a
sir.
drink,
Well
right?
spoken. Tapey
Yeah.
juju.
So yeah, so that's my master bus. So I start there. Now I mentioned the EQs and things before. Should I go into that, or should we talk about
Well,
yours first
no,
before I?
because mine gets way more complicated. So let's talk about your EQ things, because you're saying that you have all this stuff it's on, but it's not technically being used as you're doing
Initially,
the
yes,
mix initially.
yeah,
So how do you make things not be used? I mean, is the EQ just sit at 12 o'clock, or your compression is
yeah.
off? I mean,
There's
how are you
basically
doing that?
there's basically no boost or cut to any other bands initially.
Uh-huh.
Now I use, like I said, the custom series, which is a very gentle slope, and that is only used sort of like at the end toward the mix if I feel like I need a little bit of sweetening, maybe a little bit of a boost in the low end,
Right, right.
maybe a little bit of top load sheen, that kind of thing. Um,
Like Charlie.
something, yeah, exactly.
Caught you
um,
off guard right there. It was almost a Trudeau moment.
yeah, I was like, what? Yeah, I had to think about that one for a second, but well played, sir. Um, so a little bit of that, and I may also something that I noticed that I do relatively frequently, and that probably says more about my room than anything else. But
And that is?
I that is I tend to cut a little bit around, let's say, the 400 to 600 range, that type of thing, maybe. And I'm talking small cuts here. I'm talking, maybe up to 2 dB, if that,
Okay.
and it's just kind of massaging that. If I feel like I add, or I want like a little bit more air, we like air, I use the airband EQ, and again, it's maybe a dB and a half or something like that if I need it. That you have to be pretty careful with, because I find that it sounds super sweet when you're mixing to it, or mixing it and listening to it. It's like, oh, that sounds awesome. More, 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 more. And then it's just a sizzle, and it's just super fatiguing, right? So
I guess it depends
gentle
on
with
your
them.
airband EQ, doesn't it?
Well, no, it depends on how fatigued your ears are when you're listening to that. But it
Yeah,
makes
there's
things,
that.
oh, it's nice and bright. It does an amazing job, but generally, I would say that the rule of thumb is like, if you have to do too much processing on your EQ wise on the mix bus, then your mix is wrong.
Yes, I
Uh,
would agree
so,
with that statement right there. If you are having to do such drastic, gigantic moves on your master bus,
yeah,
shit's wrong somewhere else in the mix.
right. Yeah. So, oh, there's too much low end. I got it. Okay, well then turn down the bass or the kick or whatever happens to be.
Whatever's
So
creating that low end, of course.
right. Yeah. So we're talking minute things, and these are things that I would only start EQing on my master bus towards the latter stages, obviously, of the mix, when I'm like 95% there, and I just want that extra little stuff.
Yeah,
So
little
that's why it's
push,
nice to do that.
that push
Yeah,
over the cliff.
exactly. But these go to 11.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's my mix bus.
Yay for your mix bus. Woo, let's have a party.
Yay me. Yeah, no, but that works Well, for me, the reason I like to have the master bus compressor on at all times is because I like to mix into it, so I hear how much that's going to affect. Because I do have other buses as well that you're going to allude to
Mm,
coming up here, where there already is like certain compression happening. So I want to make sure I'm not overcooking stuff, and as the mix builds, it's just keep everything's nice and tight.
tight, spongy, loose, controlled, however you want it to
Yeah,
act.
spongy is not generally a term I would use for in anything kind of um, positive when it comes to audio, but yeah, all the above, I guess. Uh,
Except for spongy, apparently.
yeah, spongy is like, ooh, wow, that sounds really great. It's really spongy, said
Yeah, it can
nobody
really
ever,
sit
right?
right in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so, but what about you? What
What
do you
about
do?
me? Well, let's take a moment for our sponsors to sponge up some of your time, and then we'll talk about me.
Sounds good.
All right, and we're back. We're now talking about my style of mixed bus.
I have a feeling I'm going to need a sip of coffee here to keep up with this. So,
Everybody better get whatever it is that keeps them alert. If you need no dose or a shot of Adderall and some coffee, I don't know what it is that keeps you up, but prepare to sit back, strap in, and go, what the fuck? Um, Essentially, I don't have something on a master bus per se, because when
right.
most people, when they talk about the master bus, they're talking about the final two track. If it's a stereo mix, if it's a surround sound mix, you're talking 5.1 to 7.1 or 8.1 or 9.1 or however many one. Um,
That's a different animal.
yeah,
Yeah.
whole different animal there.
Yeah.
Uh, where everything is going to one specific final stereo left right mix channel.
Yeah.
That's why they call it the master bus. I don't do that per se. I do something a little bit different, and it has more to do with my bizarre workflow savings for future mix options, I guess is the best way to say it. In
Yeah.
mix
I don't
options
think,
by saying multiple versions of the mix going all at once.
yes. And this is, I've seen your mix template and it's,
It takes a PhD in mixing or something to understand, right?
it's not quite that bad, but it's important to, I think, make the distinction here that that has grown out of a need and in a need for simplicity to do, like you said, multiple mixes and things that you frequently do.
Yes.
So explain that process a little bit for us, if you would.
Okay. So most people, when they're mixing a song, will mix like they'll bust down their mixes. They'll have all their drums grouped to a bus. They'll have all their guitars grouped to a bus. They'll have all their synthesizers grouped to a bus. Anything happening bass generally grouped to a bus. Vocals grouped to a bus, etc. And then from there, that's usually where they go down to the two track mix.
Yep.
That's the general way. And I'm assuming that's how you kind of do it too, because I've seen your mix
Yes.
templates.
Hmm.
And that's essentially what you're doing. You're grouping all of the similar instruments into a bus that then feeds to your master bus.
Yeah. And I, on an A side to that, I think the more, um, I think I'm going to try your method when I do more production music. When I do that. So my description here is generally overall now how I do things. But when I'm doing
Right.
production music, I think I'm going to adopt your idea there because I think it's very, very effective.
It is. It's effective for artist mixings of songs too. It's just you have to get used to the workflow, I think.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do what I do, especially if you're dumping out like 7 or 8 alternate mixes of the same song, and you do
Yeah.
that by hand by one mix channel bus, you have to do that like 7 or 8 times. That's a lot of work to just sit there and wait and then flip something off, do the next bounce, flip it back on, flip the next thing off, do the next bounce. That's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real pain in the ass. So I've devised a mix template that is substantially more complicated from the initial go about of doing a mix, but makes the end result something where it's one pass to do all 8 submixes, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
So it keeps
But I
things
think
a
we
lot
could
more simple.
probably spend a whole episode talking about that at some point in the future, which I
Oh
think we should.
which we should. We definitely should,
right.
because it is a very, very different way to look and deal with a mix, and it can seem complicated. Once you understand it, it's really not that complicated. But who knows? Maybe at some point it just becomes, hey, did you white sides that mix? Kind of like how people go, hey, did you Brower that mix? Already at this point, because he's notorious for what? It's parallel processing on his stuff, I think.
No, he uses multiple buses.
But they're all parallel.
He sends different
things to different buses, and then they bus back to the one grouping bus. Yeah. So it's sort of like that, but it's not exactly that. So yeah, he's got his Brower method. I've got apparently the Whitesides method. Anyway, to simplify it. In terms of like how we could do it for this particular podcast, I essentially have 2 master buses to think about. And one of those master buses is all the musical instruments. The other master bus is all the vocals, if it's a vocal song. Thus, I have 2 master buses that then feed down to your stereo mix.
Right.
That's the simplified version of what I do.
Yeah.
Because what I actually do gets a little bit more complicated than that. So essentially, I have 2 buses that are set in my mix template in the simplified terms, that all of the musical buses, from drums to guitars, basses, synths, any like sousaphone, whatever it is all being eventually bused to a music bus, labeled as such, the musical instruments bus. I leave nothing on that bus while I'm mixing. I do the same thing for all the vocals. All the vocals will go through their little stages and then finally route down to a vocal bus. I leave nothing on those channels as I mix. Once I am done with the mix to a certain extent, where I'm like ready to say, okay, I'm near the finalization of all this, that's when I route them into these 2 buses so that I can then balance between the music and the vocals if something needs to change on the fly. That gives me the option to automate between the levels of the vocal, the levels of the music. Then, generally speaking, on the music bus, I will likely route a tape plugin. Most often, it's the Studer A800 by Universal Audio. From there,
that's your first.
That's the first thing. It's as if I'm coming off the tape deck going into the output. I don't do the tape last on that. I do it as if it was coming from the tape, as if the playback was coming from tape.
Got it.
I don't know why I chose that method. It's just generally what I do.
If it works, it works.
It works, it works. So then from there, I choose some sort of compressor for the music bus. Generally for the music, I go more along the lines of either an 1176 or a Fairchild. Another good one that's good to use on that bus is the Distressor. And then past that point, the next thing that I may or may not have on there is an EQ. And more often than not, it's literally for little doses of certain things. Minute doses, we're talking not much. And generally, it's probably going to be the Moog EQ4 for that process.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm dealing with the music and I'm coming off the tape is literally at unity. So if I flip it off, the volume's not changing. All it's supposed to do is just provide a little bit of that quote unquote tape glue that you were mentioning before.
Yeah. Hitting the transients,
doing its thing, and just kind of providing a little bit of that vibe for tape. From there, the compressor is literally set to a point where the attack is generally pretty slow.
Yeah.
so that it's not like trying to gobble up on things real quick. And then the release is set fairly quick. So it's
Hmm.
not doing a lot in terms of the amount of like how quick it's coming in and how long it's holding the sound. Of course, that is program dependent, but generally speaking, I keep it fairly slow on the attack and fairly quick on the release when it comes to the bus. The amount that I'm compressing literally is just kissing the signal.
Right.
And by that, I mean, it's not like a deep throat French kiss where I'm compressing 10 dB. I'm literally kissing it like a little peck on the cheek kind of thing where I'm hitting maybe 2 dB if I'm lucky.
Right.
If it's going over 2 dB, I back it off because it shouldn't be doing much. Because I know that down the mastering stage, when the mix has finally gone off to mastering, they're going to hit it with some more compression. So I'm trying to be very gentle with the amount, no matter what
Yeah.
compressor I use, whether it's a distressor, the 1176, what have you. Uh, that's my music bus.
Yeah. So
My
um, you like to control just sort of like essentially like spikes in audio that just to massage that a little
yes,
bit more, but it's not anything that really is going to affect the dynamic range or anything like that. It's just going to be even out the peaks a little bit.
right. That is
Okay.
correct. So now on the vocal bus, it's similar depending on the vibe of the song. I am going to likely start with the Studer A800 from Universal Audio. Past that, I'm likely to throw on the most likely thing that I'm going to throw on is the LA2A, the
Okay.
original UA modeled LA2A with the kind of bluish face. It's the old school one. It's the slowest compressor they have in the LA2A market. And it just imparts some, as they would say, juju that makes it
Hmm.
sound really good. And the amount that I'm kissing that with is literally, it's going to touch the needle, is going to bounce maybe 2 dB, maybe 3, but not much more than that at all. And then after that, if I'm throwing any EQ on for any necessary reason, it's the Moog EQ4 and it's only for the air band at that
Right.
point on the vocal bus. So that's the split between those two buses. And once I've done those things where I've got those items on each one of those, I may need to make minor adjustments between the volume levels of both in order to get the balance back. It doesn't generally go too far out of whack, maybe a dB or so
Right.
between the vocal and the music at that point. And then from there, that allows me to route various things for different mixes so that I can do all these particular alternate mixes for a piece of, for a song, piece of music, whatever it is, all at once rather than having to sit there and bounce like 4, 5, 6, 7, however many times you need to bounce multiple mixes for. That's the
But that's
simplified version of what I'm doing.
yeah. But yeah. But that's the fun part when you sit there and wait. And
Well, no, not really.
no, it is not.
I'd rather
Sarcasm
be able to
alert.
like just hit that button once and watch all the mixes print themselves at the same time and be like, yes.
Now it's time for dinner. Yeah.
That's right. Instead of
Yeah.
like, hold on, dear, I have to wait until I bounce this 5 more times. Well, how long is that going to take? Well, the song is about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Times that by 6. You're looking at close to an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah. If you're doing it real time. But yeah, that is tedious.
Well, the thing
So,
about that's another thing we can touch on right now is whether you're doing a real time bounce or an offline bounce. I tend to do all my bounces real time for a very specific reason because they
yeah.
do actually, the things are different in terms of how certain mathematical things happen for whatever reason. I've done the knowing tests between
Yeah.
offline and online bounces or real time and offline. There is a difference in how reverbs react. There is a difference in how certain plugins react to whether it's an offline or a real time bounce. It's weird.
Right. But isn't that, could that be explained by sort of like the analog behavior of that gear? So even if you did, let's
It
say,
could be.
an offline bounce, twice, or would they still null out? Probably not.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who
So I
knows?
think
I don't
it's
know.
and it's down to gear that has
But
that.
the other thing too is in doing it in real time, you can listen to what the bounce is doing and making sure that it's
Yeah.
there. And then
Yeah.
if you don't have to
Right.
do it 7 times, it's a one-time bounce and you know everything else is good. You're all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
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 Oh,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
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 Yeah. No, it's a very good process, but also, I think, and I could be wrong, but the way that you are doing your routing and everything, that you pretty much have to do it that way, right?
Yes.
Because you're printing them to a different track, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
outputs
Yeah.
and stuff.
Because I'm doing so many bounces, I can't do them offline. I have to do them all real time,
Yeah.
which
But
is
still, you end up
yeah.
saving time anyway.
saving
so
a
it's okay.
ridiculous amount of time. Instead of saving 20, 30 seconds per song, I'm saving multiple times of the 3 minutes or whatever the song is. So
Yeah. 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 So yeah, your bank account worth of time increases.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
So, but I think that's a really good explanation there. But I think to sort of sum it up, your workflow really depends on all of this. Obviously, what you're intending to do. But first off, we should say again, if we haven't already said it, that we're not talking about mastering, air quotes here.
No,
on
no,
the
no,
bus.
no,
It's not
no.
about slamming an L1 or an L3 on there and just squeezing the crap out of it.
No,
We're
that's not
talking
a
about
mix bus thing at all.
yeah. So we're talking about
That's like client masturbation version of mix or something. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. We're talking about actually imparting something on there that we want to be there. That's the part of the sound that
Correct.
we want the mix to sound like. The mastering part is something completely different, and so that's not what we're doing here. Now, that's not to say that sometimes when I do a sort of like a bounce version for a client, they might want one that's like, oh, I want one that competes with loudness. Then I will do a bounce, but that's not the bounce. Like,
right.
That's for somebody to listen to in their car or whatever, without having to feel like it's so much lower in level.
Yes. So. Here's another thing that actually I probably should bring up. There's probably a fair amount of listeners who use the SonarWorks plugin to correct problems in the room. And Chris and I are no exception to that. We both use it as well. And the thing about that is if it is on your master bus, as it should be in the very last point in the system, if you are doing a bounce from your master bus, from your 2-track master, you have to turn that thing off before you do the bounce. Otherwise shit doesn't come out sounding right. And the benefit to my method of my templates is I don't have to turn that off. My signals, as they get recorded, so to speak, my 2-track mixes never touch that bus that's at the end of the chain, so to speak, the actual master volume bus in Logic or in Luna or whatever DAW that you happen to be using. Because of that, I don't literally have to turn it off, which is a nice feature. I don't forget, like, oh shit, I bounced that with the SonarWorks on.
I've done that more times than I care to admit.
And I'm sure there's many people that do use SonarWorks that must have some sort of checklist that says, don't forget to turn off the SonarWorks before you bounce the master or bounce the mix kind of thing.
The mix sounds weird. Oh, yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Because it's compensating for my room.
Why is there an extreme amount of bass in this thing?
Yeah. So, take it from me. Turn that stuff off.
Right. Or if you use bouncing a complicated template, use
your method,
such as mine, then you won't have to worry about that because it's not affecting that part.
Yeah. Good point. Good point to bring up. But it is a great piece of software.
It is a fantastic piece of software because not everybody has the ideal room to mix in or the ideal headphones to mix on. And to alleviate that problem, SonarWorks is a kick-ass piece of kit.
Yeah. It certainly is. It is very glaring because it comes with already these profiles for different manufactured headphones. And if you pull up the profile for said mic or for said headphones, just to see how they hype the sound. It is unbelievable. It's like
Yes.
when you see certain ones, like, oh my God, this is crazy. No wonder my mixes sound dull if I'm mixing on this, because it's adding like 5 dB at 6K or something.
Sure.
Yeah. So put stuff on your master buzz.
Well,
or not. I
have
don't know,
a
whatever
reason
works
for
for you.
doing it. Don't just put
Yeah.
stuff there for the sake of putting it there.
Yeah. Do the what did we mention without saying any names? To have the 20 plugin.
Oh yeah. Oh, but that
Don't-
wasn't on a master bus. That was on a channel strip.
Yeah.
And he had like
Yeah, we'll leave that out,
multiple
but yeah.
instances of the same plugin in various stages, because they'd get to a certain point with the stage of the sound and be like, oh, we
Yeah.
need to add this, and then they add another thing, and it's like, oh, and then this, and then that, and you got like 5 plugins that are the same plugin doing similar things at different points in the chain, and you got like 21 plugins on a channel strip. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So that's kind of what I guess we're hinting at, is you're doing that on your master bus. Something's wrong in your MISC. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah. So these are small sweetening things, and
They're not meant to be the heavy hand.
right. It's like the last little piece of touch up on the makeup or something like that,
Yeah, right before the mastering, which is the final touch up of the makeup and the sheen and everything else.
Yeah, that's the
Make your
absolutely.
mastering engineer's job easier by kicking ass on your mix.
Yes.
Right? Absolutely.
Yes. Yep, there we go.
And that, I guess, is kind of like our final sirrah, whatever that phrase is, of like, hey, we're kind of done with today's episode, aren't we?
I think we are.
All right.
I think we are. So there we go.
Yes.
So go get greasy and have fun with your car.
Yeah, I get to go have fun and get dirty with my car instead of my mix right now.
All right.
And with that being said, if you have something that you would like us to discuss on Inside the Recording Studio that you would like to know, send us an email or a comment or something, and we will discuss it.
Sounds good.
All right. For everybody out there and inside the recording studio land, we will see you